Long before castles drew crowds with their scenic views, they served as the first and last line of defense. Every tower and gate was designed to signal strength, safeguard daily life, and stay one step ahead of attackers. These iconic structures are the solidified history of Europe, monuments to uncertainty, power, and the developments of military technology. If we look closer, these private fortified residences offer a fantastic history lesson. In this video, we're tracing an evolutionary timeline, a 4-century-long arms race between the attacker and the defender. We'll start with simple wooden fortifications and end with fortresses so sophisticated they're almost a geometry lesson. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe entered a turbulent era. Royal authority was fragmented, especially after the breakup of the Carolingian Empire in 887. Defenses reverted to basics: earthen ramparts, wooden stockades, and repurposed ancient walls. Many communities huddled within old Roman forts or behind hastily dug ditches for protection. The rise of the castle is typically attributed to a reaction to attacks by Magyars, Muslims, and Vikings. A powerful noble's best hope was to fortify his home, to turn his residence into a defensible position. Thus was born the idea of the castle, a private stronghold, both residence and fortress, from which a lord could control and defend his land. The story of the castle begins around the 10th century. Forget thick stone walls for a moment. The earliest true castles, the motte-and-bailey, were simple, practical, and fast to build. The motte was an artificial earth mound, often 20 to 30 feet high, topped with a wooden tower called the keep. Below it lay the bailey, a large enclosed courtyard protected by a ditch and a timber palisade. It gave the lord a vantage point and was difficult to assault directly. This design was quick to build and, for a time, formidable. A small garrison on a motte could rain arrows on attackers and retreat into the tower if the bailey fell. These early castles were truly revolutionary in regions like England, where nothing quite like them had been seen before. It was a perfect solution for the Normans, who needed to secure vast swaths of newly conquered land in England quickly, following the Battle of Hastings in 1066. In the 150 years that followed, the Normans covered the country with these castles, building about 1,000 of them in England and Wales. But wooden castles had a massive flaw, one that made them all but obsolete within a century. The answer is obvious: fire. A single flame could turn the strongest wooden tower into a massive bonfire. This vulnerability triggered the first great leap in castle design. From the late 11th century onwards, wealthy lords and kings began replacing their wooden constructions. The wooden tower on the motte evolved into a stone keep, a massive great tower that became the lord's residence and the last line of defense. These were the true icons of early medieval power. The keeps were the heart of the castle, towering multi-story stone forts that could dominate the surrounding landscape. Stone keeps rose in England, France, and beyond, exemplified by structures like the White Tower in London, and keeps at Rochester, Dover, and Kenilworth. The appeal of stone was obvious. A stone fortress promised endurance. Its walls were massively thick and could shrug off arrows and ordinary fire with ease. However, stone keeps were not invulnerable. Siege warfare also evolved. Attackers brought in trebuchets and undermined walls. Even the mightiest tower had a blind spot at its base. Enemy soldiers could dig tunnels under the corners, collapsing the ground under the heavy weight. In one famous siege in 1215, King John's forces literally collapsed part of Rochester Castle's square keep by tunneling under a corner tower. Still, for a time, the stone keep reigned supreme. It provided secure living quarters and a strong point that outlasted the rest of the castle's defenses. By the 1200s, hundreds of stone keeps dominated the horizons of Europe's war-torn realms, from the mighty donjons of France to the tall Burgfried of German castles. But the lesson was clear. Castle design had to keep evolving. The stage was set for a revolution in design that would make castles deadlier and more resilient. By the late 12th and 13th centuries, castle architects started thinking beyond the keep. Instead of relying on a single tower, they turned the whole castle into a multi-layered fortress. This is called a concentric castle, essentially a castle within a castle. These designs featured two or more rings of curtain walls, one inside the other. The outer wall, lower and thicker, served as the first line of defense, while the inner wall, higher, formed a final refuge. Attackers breaching the outer gate would find themselves in a killing zone between the walls, trapped under fire from all sides. The concentric stronghold forced attackers to conquer it section by section and tower by tower, only to face yet another wall beyond. This era saw castle builders become much more sophisticated in all aspects of defense. Gatehouses, which was once a castle's weak point, turned into mini-fortresses of their own, flanked by towers. Towers along the walls, initially square, were soon built round to better deflect missile strikes and eliminate corner blind spots. Walls grew taller and thicker, sometimes protected by a talus to resist mining. Narrow arrow slits appeared, allowing defenders to shoot out while remaining largely safe within. Moats were also expanded. At castles like Kenilworth in England, even entire artificial lakes were created as moats. Every element of design was aimed to slow, channel, and punish the attacker. It's no coincidence that this golden age of castle architecture paralleled the Crusades abroad and internal wars at home. Crusader castles in the Holy Land showcased concentric layouts that European knights eagerly studied. Yet, the later Middle Ages brought relative stability in some regions, and with it, a desire for comfort. Lords wanted castles that could impress and accommodate, not just withstand assaults. We see the rise of courtyard castles and stately residences. Castles like Bodiam in England were built with aesthetics and livability in mind, featuring symmetrical layouts and large windowed chambers within a moated, formidable outline. But these domestic changes were happening just as a new invention was crossing the Alps, an innovation so powerful it would render every stone wall in Europe obsolete. A technology that would launch the final evolution of the European castle. A technology that would require an entirely new form of defense. In the 15th century, the medieval castle met its match in the form of gunpowder and cannons. At first, early cannons were clumsy and not very powerful, more dangerous to their crews than to castle walls. However, as metallurgy and gun design improved, artillery evolved into a castle killer. The shock came in 1453, when the seemingly impregnable double walls of Constantinople were breached and shattered by Ottoman cannons. The fall of Constantinople sent a clear message across Europe. The age of tall stone castles was ending. Kings and lords raced to respond. If high vertical walls made easy targets, the solution was to lower and thicken the walls. Late medieval fortifications in Italy and soon across Europe started to take on a new shape. Towers were sunk lower into broad bastions. Walls were banked with earth on the inside to absorb the impact of cannon fire. Fortresses spread outward rather than upward, with angled bastion shapes to better deflect or withstand cannon shot. This was the birth of the bastion fort, which is also known as the star-shaped fort, which soon replaced medieval castles entirely. In England, King Henry VIII built a chain of innovative device forts along the coast in the 1540s, like Deal Castle and Pendennis Castle, whose circular layouts and thick, curved walls were specifically designed to endure cannon bombardment. These new forts bristled with gun embrasures for dozens of cannons, but they were not places for nobles to live in grandeur, as they were purely military installations. The castle's unique dual role as both fort and home was being left behind. The Gunpowder Revolution thus rang the death knell for the traditional castle, More importantly, the aristocracy began to lose interest in fortifying their homes. There was no incentive to invest in castle walls that could be shattered in days by a battery of cannons, and many nobles chose instead to construct unfortified but splendid palaces and manor houses, showcasing their wealth and taste rather than military might. By the 17th century, castle had become a nostalgic concept. Real defensive architecture moved to city bastion walls and artillery forts, while former castles were left as administrative centers, ruins, or romantic residences. The end of the castle age didn't happen overnight, but it was undeniable. In some regions, medieval castles were refashioned into comfortable country homes once their defensive value waned. In other cases, they were abandoned or even demolished during wars, as happened to several English castles during the 17th century Civil War. The castle, as a living form of fortification, was effectively extinct. Strangely enough, that was not the end of the castle story, not by a long shot. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Europeans developed a fascination with the medieval past. Ivy-clad castle ruins became picturesque highlights for poets and painters. The Romantics found beauty in decay, admiring how shattered towers and empty moats evoked a sense of history and drama. The 19th century saw a full-blown Gothic revival, and with it, the rise of a new type of castle. Wealthy individuals and even kings constructed castles not for defense, but for dreams, emulating the medieval chivalric ideal. The most famous example is Bavaria's Neuschwanstein Castle, a fairy tale palace commissioned by King Ludwig II in 1869, complete with turrets, towers, and throne rooms befitting a legend. If you found this video on medieval history interesting, consider subscribing to stay up to date on our latest uploads.